Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in to my little program. Today we're going to talk about terrorism and how Sky News have particularly got their knickers in a knot over the fact that the Australian government is suggesting that they might move to have families that were caught up with the ISIS movement and with terrorism and now living in camps in certain places around the world, who we should or should not return to Australia. Now, remembering that a lot of these families are simply women and children who have been caught up in the war in Syria and elsewhere, and who are locked into these camps and who simply want to return home. The problem is that Sky News and the right-wing media in particular seem to think that these people are terrorists. And as a result of these extreme behaviours by their partners and by men, and we do need to say specifically men because they're the ones that are causing the havoc, that they themselves have been radicalised. Now, I do accept that many of these young people caught up in all of this are probably in their teens now. They've been part of the ISIS movement for a long time and perhaps may be radicalised. Does that mean then that we have to give up on them? Does that mean then that because they're Australian citizens, we should ignore their rights to live in Australia? Well, I don't think it does. I think that one of the things that we need to start to focus on is firstly work out how these people have been indoctrinated into whatever it is that are the ISIS beliefs, and particularly what it is that we can do to help them. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I often see young people who have been indoctrinated into certain beliefs within our own society, whether that be in relation to how men should treat women, for example, their general view of the world, that some of these kids get involved in gangs and they commit terrible behaviours that often get them locked up and sometimes other people's killed. That happens in our own society, and I don't know what we're doing that's terribly profound about all of that either. But in this case, these people, many of them probably didn't know, particularly the women, I guess, perhaps didn't know what they were getting into when they started. Some of their partners have already been killed or captured, and they're basically stranded. And the question is that whether we as a country can be sympathetic and empathetic enough to understand their circumstances and therefore to want to bring them back to Australia seems to be a vexed issue. So we have Credlin, who looks like the woman from 101 Dalmatians, I must say. But she is advocating, I guess, that these people are completely indoctrinated into the beliefs of their these kids in particular, indoctrinated into their beliefs, and that we don't know what to do with them, and that it would cost a fortune in order to monitor all of these people. Now, it might cost a lot of money too, but they have the right to live in this country, and we have the obligation to help them through whatever are the issues that are confronted them, as opposed to leaving them isolated and basically alone in these camps in Syria and elsewhere. So I believe we should think about ways by which we could bring them home, but then let's just listen to what the right wing are saying about all of this and how they are fearful of anything that resembles stuff that they simply don't know about.
More today on the Albanese government's push to bring back to Australia women who chose to leave this country to join Islamic State and their children. While there's no doubt plenty of sympathy for the children who are, in all of this, innocent, for the women, little sympathy. After all, they chose to join the death cult and involve themselves in an ideology that was fixated on the violent death and destruction of our Western way of life.
I think it's worth noting here that some of these women were extremely young when they were taken, that they had no idea what they were getting into. And as I said before, it's probably no different from women who find themselves in DV relationships. The men are in control, the men tell the women what to do, and there may be some of these women, Peter, who actually want to escape from all of this. They want a more normal and safe existence. But oh no, to start with, we've got to blame the women because that's simply what the right do.
These are women who joined a death cult intent on killing Australian soldiers, intent on mass casualty terror attacks against innocent civilians overseas and, of course, here at home. For me, the images of journalists and aid workers kneeling in their orange jumpsuits as Islamic State madmen decapitated them with swords all.
Now, it's hard to imagine. Like, I understand what she's saying about those images. They are terrible. This is not the women and those kids doing this. This was their partners. And actually, wasn't, we don't know what role their partners had in ISIS either. So to make these blanket statements about stuff which you know nothing about, Peter, and you can't, there's no evidence to indicate that any of these women and children were involved in any of those events that you've described. But to breed fear in the way that you do, I find is, it's sad. It's sad because I think it's unnecessary. I think we should have more compassion for these people than you do.
While praising Allah, are images I can't get out of my mind. And when we want to talk about bringing these women home, it's those images I can't forget. And I doubt I'm alone. Is it any wonder that this plan to return the jihadi brides to the suburbs of Melbourne and Sydney wasn't a feature of the last election? I don't recall it ever being mentioned once by the Prime Minister, but here we are with a National Security Cabinet meeting today, meeting to tick off all the details. The risk to the lives of Australian military and police will be forced to go into a war zone, and bring them out cannot.
Well, need we say we don't know the risk that is associated with any of this. And I'm not too sure where these people are situated, whether they are in the midst of a war zone. There seems to be these camps that are set up specifically for these purposes. And there was an interview with a man from one of the NGOs who had been there a number of times to interview these parents. Now, he seemed to have got in and out all right without there being any great difficulty. And there must be some negotiating process that's taken place between the organisation that is looking after these camps and the people that are flying in and out in order to find ways to remove these families. So again, Peter, where in the friggin' hell do you get your information from?
Be underestimated. And the ongoing need to spend millions and millions in monitoring and surveillance to ensure they don't do here what they clearly supported Islamic State doing to others overseas.
Again, you don't know what these women and children were supporting. You haven't met them, you haven't had conversations with them. You're completely ignorant, woman, as to who these people are. Perhaps, Credlin, if you met them, if you understood where they were coming from, you wouldn't be so friggin' negative about these people at all. And all I can say, basically, is shame on you for adopting this particular narrow-minded view with bugger all information, and all you're doing is fear-mongering.
Will go on for years. Here is the former Home Affairs Minister last night on this program explaining why she never supported bringing these Islamic State women to Australia.
The risk that our personnel would have been under in going into Syria was one of the reasons that I was very much opposed in my time as Home Affairs Minister to sending them in there to conduct any such mission to bring these people out of Syria.
the reality was that you, Karen, didn't have the will to do that. And also, maybe it could be that the circumstances have changed now. I mean, you're in government for 9 years, and I can assure you that perhaps you didn't put the best effort forward in terms of trying to resolve this situation, because most of the time, for most of the things that you did, you bastards just sat on your hands.
And believe me, Karen Andrews will have had all the detailed briefings on this. If she says the risk was too great, I believe her over the bleeding hearts in some of the newspapers today who want these women and children home on the next available flight. That we're going to have to spend millions on welfare, housing and justice programs for these women says everything. Given the large number of convicted terrorists already in our justice system, we know how much it costs to monitor individuals.
So at the end of the day, it comes down to these are just terrible, terrible people, not knowing them, not having met them, not having conversations with them, not understanding the kids' circumstances either, not even offering a helping hand so that we can work out whatever difficulties they may have, and that we can do what we can as a society to make their life better. Or is the alternative to leave these families there in these camps in order to be abused by those people around them, to eventually perhaps to lose their own lives, to perhaps be even more radicalised than they may be right at this moment, and then become, as these kids become adults, to become a fighting force for the Islamic State. So I think we need the first thing, we need to demonstrate some compassion. I think that's really important. And if Sky News could ever find anybody that could be compassionate, please let me know. But we need to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to ensure that all of these people are safe. Thanks for being with me, everybody. Look, I just want to say, if you would mind just subscribing, ring the bell. If you want to be notified of further videos, I put out a few each week. And I look forward to catching up with you next time on my show. Take care, everybody. See you there. Bye.